Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Good morning. I'm Amy Morris.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Here are the stories we're following today.
We begin with the intersection of politics and law. Former President Donald Trump facing a deadline today to post a 9-figure bond to appeal his civil fraud judgment in New York. Bloomberg's Nathan Hager with that story.
Trump has been ordered to post 120% of the $454 million verdict against him for inflating his asset values. That amounts to a bond of about $545 million. Last week, the former president told an appeals court that amount is unattainable because the insurance companies would only take cash as collateral, not real estate. Trump says he has almost $500 million in cash on hand. He says he intends to use a substantial amount of that on his campaign, which is already spending millions on Trump's legal fees. In Washington, I'm Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Nathan, thank you. While staying with politics, the U.S. Senate passed legislation over the weekend to avoid a partial government shutdown. The Senate cleared the sprawling $1.2 trillion package on a 74-24 vote. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer spoke after the vote.
It is good for the American people that we have reached a bipartisan agreement to complete the job of funding the government.
And it comes after the House passed the bill Friday despite stiff opposition from far-right Republicans. But striking that budget deal triggered a new attempt to remove House Speaker Mike Johnson. Former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who was removed in October, says he does not see the motion picking up much traction.
The one advice I would give to the conference and to the Speaker is do not be fearful of a motion to vacate. I do not think they could do it again. That was sheerly based on Matt Gaetz trying to stop an ethics complaint. I don't think the Democrats will go along with it, too.
And Kevin McCarthy speaking on Face the Nation from CBS, which can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio.
Now let's turn to the latest on the deadly terror attacks in Russia. Russia has charged 4 men in connection with the Moscow concert hall attack, where at least 137 people were killed. Islamic State has taken responsibility for the attack. Putin and other officials have made vague claims of involvement from Ukraine. Tony Halpin leads Bloomberg government's coverage of Russia.
In any normal country, a massacre of this size would immediately raise questions about the competence of the security services, and there'd be political demands for heads to roll in the leadership. But nothing of that sort is happening in Russia because Putin, even though he dismissed warnings of a terrorist attack just a few days before it actually took place, doesn't, of course, want to hold the FSB accountable for these failures. And it serves the Russian state's purpose to try and blame things on Ukraine because they're desperately trying to maintain support for the war, and that's raising questions about what they might be planning next.
Bloomberg's Tony Halpin says the violence was the biggest loss of life from a militant assault in Moscow since 2002.
Well, there's new developments, Amy, on the war in the Middle East this morning. Vice President Kamala Harris is warning Israel against a major attack on the Gazan city of Rafah. That's where more than 1 million Palestinians have sought refuge as the war against Hamas continues. Harris spoke on ABC's This Week.
We've been very clear that it would be a mistake to move into Rafah with any type of military operation.
A mistake, but would there be consequences if he does move forward?
Well, we're going to take it one step at a time, but we've been very clear in terms of our perspective on whether or not that should happen.
And Vice President Harris, speaking on ABC's This Week, heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio. Israel says it must send troops into Rafah because it's the last remaining bastion of Hamas. Israeli intelligence estimates there are around 5,000 to 8,000 Hamas fighters and group leaders in the city.
Turning to markets now, U.S. futures are lower. Treasury yields are higher as we begin this new trading week. Bond traders are cautiously reloading wagers that burned them just a few weeks ago as the Fed and other central banks appear set to start cutting rates as soon as June. We get more from Bloomberg's Mike McKenzie.
The bond market has, on 7 occasions now, positioned itself for the so-called Fed pivot trade, and it's been burned every time because it's just a case of you've got to get the timing right on this trade. So all signs indicate that central banks, not just the Fed, but the Bank of England and the European Central Bank, are looking to do a coordinated sort of easing around June, and that really depends on whether the data allows them to do it.
Bloomberg's Mike McKenzie says investors will be eyeing a busy week of economic data, including the Fed's preferred inflation gauge that's due out on Friday, which, by the way, happens to be a market holiday.
Well, we turn to company news now, Amy, and more details are coming out from Tim Cook's visit to China. The Apple CEO is pitching artificial intelligence as an essential tool for businesses committed to reducing carbon footprints. And Cook spoke at a forum yesterday in Beijing.
We would not be able to recover the level of material that we do today for recycling without AI. I mean, it's already fundamental in our calculation, and I think it provides an enormous tool in the toolkit for every company that's wishing to be carbon neutral or to lower their emissions by a substantial amount.
Apple CEO Tim Cook appeared at the annual China Development Forum on carbon neutrality and climate change. It's part of a week of public displays of Apple's commitment to China.
Staying in Asia, it looks like electric car maker BYD is cutting prices further in China. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia anchor Brian Curtis bringing us details now from Hong Kong.
Not only has BYD unseated Tesla as the world's top-selling EV maker, but it has now set its sights on Toyota and Volkswagen. These new cuts are some of the most aggressive we've seen in China's bruising price war. The automaker is discounting almost every electric and hybrid car model it sells. Data from the portal 16888.com shows BYD has cut prices on more than 100 existing model versions. Its most affordable car now sells for less than $10,000. In Hong Kong, Brian Curtis, Bloomberg Radio.
All right, Brian, thank you. Well, Janet Yellen will reportedly visit China next month. Politico is reporting the Treasury Secretary will meet with the country's senior leaders. Yellen previously traveled to Beijing in July. And it's time now for a look at some of the other stories making news in New York and around the world. And for that, we're joined by Bloomberg's Michael Barr. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. New Jersey First Lady Tammy Snyder Murphy has made a big announcement in her race for the Senate.
After many busy, invigorating, and yes, challenging months, I am suspending my Senate campaign today.
Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
The race is for the seat of Democrat Bob Menendez, who's pleaded not guilty to federal bribery charges. He said he will not run for the Democratic nomination, but did leave open an independent candidacy. Murphy says she's been genuine and factual throughout, but that it's become clear that the campaign would become divisive and negative. She says she's not willing to do that. Both she and New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy previously worked at Goldman Sachs. Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Radio.
New York Mayor Eric Adams canceled a planned trip to the U.S.-Mexico border over the weekend. According to City Hall, there were safety concerns in one of the Mexican cities that he planned to visit as the reason for the change. Adams had been invited by Executive Director of the faith-based organization Catholic Charities of the Rio Grande Valley to meet with her and her team at the southern border. The Supreme Court is set to hear oral arguments tomorrow in the case centered reducing access to a widely used abortion drug. Mifepristone is usually part of a 2-pill regimen for medication abortion. The question is whether mifepristone can continue to be prescribed and mailed to individuals in the same manner as other medications. In legal briefs filed with the court, medical professionals call it among the most safest medications ever approved by the Food and Drug Administration, while the Christian conservative group suing the agency says the drug has led to tens of thousands of emergency complications. Loyola Law School professor Jessica Levinson.
In the end, I think the court will be reticent to really undermine the power of the FDA because they know this isn't just about mifepristone. This is also about other drugs.
Professor Levinson spoke to CBS. Next month, the High Court will weigh allowing state bans on abortion even when an emergency room doctor believes ending a pregnancy would preserve the mother's health. Heavy rain and quarter-size hail fell in Southern California, with wind gusts approaching 60 miles an hour in the mountain area over the weekend. In the Northeast, police reported hundreds of traffic accidents as drivers grappled with icy roads. People in New England spent Sunday digging out after a major weekend storm that dumped more than 2 feet of snow in some areas. The International Space Station is due to welcome 2 cosmonauts and a U.S. astronaut this morning. They begin a 6-month stay. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Michael Barr, and this is Bloomberg, Karen.
All right, Michael Barr, thank you. It's time now for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashower. John, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Certainly some first-round surprises in the NCAA tournament, but things went much more according to form in round 2, and the tourney heads to the Sweet 16 with all the 1 seeds, all the 2s still alive. Defending champion UConn very much alive. Huskies keep winning easily at Barclays. They led Northwestern 40-18 at halftime, went on to win 75-58. UConn's now won 8 consecutive NCAA games, all by 13 or more points. The coach is Dan Hurley.
And we're bulletproof, again, elite offense, elite defense. Didn't love the offensive rebounding today and didn't love the second half defensive rebounding. But again, 20 assists, 7 turnovers. One player had 14, and 8. Point guard had 20 and 10. It's tough to lose when you have that level of quality.
UConn now heads to Boston to play a rematch of last year's title game with San Diego State, who last night won easily over Yale. Purdue won by 39 over Utah State. Nothing easy about Houston's win. Texas A&M down 12 with 2 minutes left in regulation, hit a 3-pointer at the buzzer to force overtime. The Cougars, top seeds in the South, pulled out the win 100-95. NBA, Miami beat Cleveland by 37. If the Knicks beat the lowly Pistons tonight at the Garden, Knicks will move into a tie for third with the Cavs. Devils and Islanders both trying to work their way into the playoffs. They met at UBS. Devils won 4-0. The Capitals won 3-0. Some of the Yankees still in Florida, like Marcus Stroman. He pitched 6 scoreless innings. There's a game today with the Mets. The others are in Mexico. A 4-3 loss as 41-year-old ex-Yankee Robinson Cano had 3 hits with a home run of the game with that Mexican team today. And then everyone goes to Houston for Thursday's opener. The Dodgers are back from Korea. Today, Shohei Ohtani meets the media to answer questions about his former interpreter, accused of stealing millions from him. Georgia's starting running back Trevor Etienne arrested for DUI. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports.
Coast to coast on Bloomberg Radio, nationwide on SiriusXM, and around the world on Bloomberg.com and the Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
And today is the deadline for Donald Trump. He has to post bond to cover a $454 million civil fraud verdict or risk having New York State start the process of seizing his assets. We begin with that story when we welcome in Terry Haynes, the founder of Pangea Policy. Terry, tell us what's going to happen today with Donald Trump.
$64 question, isn't it, Amy? Good morning. I bet that what happens is a little bit, James has 2 paths here, basically. One is to start seizing assets. The other one is to wait for appeal. Somebody else. They know it's a bad situation, but are they going to be swayed one way or the other? I doubt it, particularly compared to what the hot button issues are and everything I get from talking to people who are in the political field. I mean, actually, talking to voters, on the ground, is that the economy and border security remain by far the top 2 issues. So I think this is spice one way or the other.
Let's shift gears then to Capitol Hill. The House and Senate passed that spending bill. President Biden signed it into law early Saturday. What does this bill do? I mean, when do we see another shutdown countdown?
Well, you won't. If you feel good or bad about this, it's up to you. But you won't until basically the 1st of October. Spending now is done until the end of the fiscal year, which comes the 1st of October. I think largely what you'll see pre and post election. So roughly until the end of the calendar year, is Congress kicking the can and essentially saying, look, the outcome of the election is going to determine what spending is, but markets should make no mistake. Markets have largely priced this sort of the performative stuff in as well anyway, but markets should make no mistake. There's not going to be any major change in spending no matter who wins the election, and the debt and deficit problems that exist will continue to exist. So, net, it's not going to matter very much.
We got about a minute left here. Some far-right Republicans not at all happy that House Speaker Mike Johnson even allowed this to come up for a vote at all. So what does his future look like?
I'd bet he sticks. Congresswoman Green's motion is out there but is not triggered. So she expresses disappointment with what Johnson did on spending, but this is also the kind of performative cowardice that makes Washington what it is today. She expresses tries to pull the trigger after the deed is done. So that tells you everything you need to know. It also is designed to perform some kind of a block on Ukraine voting, but I think that it probably gives centrists in both parties who are already trying to rally here more gas to actually try to get something on Ukraine done. So I'd watch that space. I've said that I think it makes it a little more likely that happens.
You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Today, your morning brief on the stories making news from Wall Street to Washington and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed at 6 a.m. Eastern each morning on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning starting at 5 a.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg 1130 in New York, Bloomberg 99.1 in Washington, Bloomberg 106.1 in Boston, and Bloomberg 960 in San Francisco.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Plus, listen coast to coast on the Bloomberg Business app, Sirius XM, the iHeartRadio app, and on Bloomberg.com. I'm Amy Morris.
And I'm Karen Moscow. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day right here on Bloomberg Daybreak.